Over this past Tuesday, yesterday, North Korea launched a missile, a two-stage missile capable of reaching Alaska. They're calling it an intercontinental ballistic missile. It provoked some interesting responses from this administration. One, Trump, who seems to have had an epiphany of sorts, and he tweeted out, "I guess we can't, in fact, count on China anymore," as he has learned. And the second that I want to play first before we start our conversation came from Nikki Haley at the UN. Let's hear what she had to say.
North Korea's launch of an ICBM is a clear and sharp military escalation. The United States is prepared to use the full range of our capabilities to defend ourselves and our allies.
That the situation has, in fact, heated up. The question that keeps coming to my mind over and over again, Gordon, and maybe you can answer this at the outset, why hasn't China been of help in this situation?
For various reasons. First of all, China sees a lot of short-term gains by North Korean provocations. Because every time North Korea does something provocative, we run to Beijing, plead for cooperation, and also we stop talking about the things that care to us. Like, for instance, predatory trade practices, cyber attacks on American networks, Taiwan, you name it. Right. We don't talk about it, and Beijing really likes that. Also, you know, China has actually weaponized North Korea. So, for instance, the mobile launcher that North Korea used yesterday to launch this Hwasong-14 missile, that came from China. Also, there's been other evidence of Chinese missiles showing up in North Korea's inventory. So I think that essentially Beijing actually likes what's going on right now.
Do they like it because what they're going to do is they're going to turn around and arm twist President Trump, and say, look, you know what, here, if you just kind of drop this billion-dollar deal with Taiwan, we can make North Korea go away? Because that strikes me as a very China-esque sort of move to do.
Yeah, we have not really imposed costs on Beijing sufficient to get them to change their long-held policies. So, you know, right now, you know, we had this $1.42 billion arms sale that the Trump administration notified on Thursday. Yeah. That's a step in the right direction, but the Chinese will see that more or less as symbolic. And also on Thursday, we unplugged a Chinese bank from the global financial institution system, this Bank of Dandong, because it was money laundering. Yeah. They also see that as symbolic because this is a small fry bank. But I think what the Trump administration needs to do is start to impose some real costs, like, for instance, unplugging Bank of China, which a big four bank in Beijing. And the reason we need to do that, to show the Chinese that we are serious about protecting ourselves.
Do you think this administration, you and I have known each other for a long time and had lots of these conversations over the years, and the thing that's always puzzled me, and you've been very careful to make it clear whenever you comment on this, China respects strength. They would much rather negotiate with somebody that is willing to be in their face and mean it, as opposed to not. Do you think this administration is beginning to get that message? Because we haven't for a long time. Not just by the way, President Trump.
I know. I mean, the last time an American administration was serious about North Korea was 1994, when we almost went to war. Last week, I think President Trump showed some tactical brilliance, because starting from Monday, he had the Indian Prime Minister at the White House, a clear signal to Beijing. Then we dropped China in the rankings in our trafficking in persons report. That was Tuesday. Thursday, as I mentioned, you know, we had arms sale to Taiwan. Also, we had the unplugging of Bank of Dandong. And then Sunday, we have a freedom of navigation exercise in the South China Sea. And so, you know, I think what Trump did was he's basically saying, Beijing, I can turn up the costs, and I haven't even started yet. And remember, he did this before he meets Xi Jinping at the G20 in Hamburg.
Right. So you think the two of them might have a more frank and interesting conversation than they did over dinner?
It's going to be a very difficult conversation for the Chinese at this sidebar that Trump will have with Xi Jinping. And it's only going to get worse, because the Chinese, I think, are going to dig in their heels for various reasons. And that means that Trump is going to have to turn up the heat.
Interesting, because already he's getting some heat from the American press. The American media is already inferring that his belligerence, as they call it, or would frame it, is going to cost us in terms of our relationship with China, and that China is going to go and make friends with Germany and make friends with Europe, and they're going to cut us out of the circle. In other words, the cost will be, we will be the losers in this whole deal. That doesn't feel like a very realistic scenario, but it definitely feels like one that the Chinese will try and play out.
Try to implement, yeah. You know, Bill, everything that we do going forward, including doing nothing, will have real costs for the United States. Because after decades of misguided policy from the White House, and this is not just the last administration, it's the one before that and the one before that, you know, everything is going to hurt us. And so, you know, at this point, Trump, you know, deals with a situation which is really disadvantageous because North Korea did not become instantly dangerous at noon on January 20th of this year.
I agree. I understand that fully. So what do we do next, do you think? I know you wrote a column on Daily Beast talking about he needs to keep being President Trump, needs to confront China. What do you mean by that?
Well, the first thing we need to do is Trump needs to ask the Chinese, in public as well as in private, but in public, how come North Korea has all these Chinese and Chinese-looking equipment in its ballistic missile inventory? Because we need the answer to that question because that really undercuts all the assumptions that we've had about Beijing's role in this. And indeed, you know, we then need to start to amp up the pressure on Bank of China and other things where we have interests that are conflicting with the Chinese. We've sort of, you know, over a course of decades, elevated China's interest over ours. It's like been a China first policy.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think Trump is going to say, look, I'm done with that. And so this is going to be a very difficult relationship with Beijing going forward, but it's necessary.
It is necessary. The specter of war is also hanging out there, whether we want to talk about it or not. It is getting very real and does hang out there. This would be a very bad place, in particular, to have a nuclear confrontation or a military confrontation. That was a slip of my tongue, pardon me. Because Seoul is literally right there at ground zero.
You know, that is an important slip of the tongue because every tabletop exercise that the U.S. military has conducted about the Korean Peninsula has gone nuke. Nothing has stayed conventional. Wow. And remember, this is not just a nuclear exchange between North Korea and the United States. China could also come in on North Korea's side. So we're talking about a situation of gravity that we have yet to comprehend.
But why would I understand that the situation exists for China because they feel like it's exploitive for them. But if we moved into an area of actual confrontation, I can understand where China might feel like in order to keep its face, it has to remain committed to North Korea. But why would they want to walk it up to that line? What's the gain in them taking it up to that line and having to stand on it?
They don't want to. Xi Jinping has the 19th Party Congress at the end of this year where he needs to consolidate his power. So he does not want problems with the United States between now and the end of this year. But nonetheless, just because he doesn't want it doesn't mean it's not going to happen. You know, Nikki Haley said the window for diplomacy is closing. She's made it very clear that the Chinese have a very limited period of time in which to solve this. They have not been. They've been duplicitous. They've been supporting the North Korean economy in ways that violate UN sanctions. Yeah. And they've been transferring ballistic missile technology to the North Koreans, making them a real threat to us. And so Trump is going to force this issue, I believe, because he has no choice.
Yeah, Nikki Haley's an interesting ambassador because her language is actually decidedly not diplomatic. It's very blunt. It is very, in fact, straightforward. You raised the issue of a political party toward the end of the year. What is Xi's position? Is he stable and steady, or are there internal challenges to him?
Well, there's certainly a lot of internal challenges because what Xi Jinping is trying to do is not only consolidate his position in the party, he's also trying to change the nature of politics and governance in China, moving back towards a 1950s style one-man rule system.
And that, of course, kind of a Mao style.
It's Maoist, and really? Xi Jinping has been very clear about his adulation for Mao.
Wow.
So you have opposition forming in the party. Nonetheless, you know, he is the preeminent figure in Chinese politics. He should be able to get what he wants, but nonetheless, he is creating this opposition. And if things go wrong for him on the economy or North Korea or whatever, then I think you're going to have the opposition come out and club him, like we saw in March of last year when a lot of people came out to oppose him.
It's very interesting. We have less than 20 seconds. Is the economy the key here for him?
I think so, largely because he's made himself responsible for it, and so he does not know how to control it, and that makes it hard. He's going to try to do everything he can to keep things stable through the 19th Party Congress.
Gordon, I'm glad you were here today. I'm not going to say I'm glad we had this conversation. This is a very serious conversation, and people need to take it very seriously because there are things at stake that are quite real. Gordon, thank you very much for coming in.